Good day, everyone. Today we are going to discuss about disinfection or decontamination of working area. This lesson is an essential aspect in making our surroundings clean and free from contaminants. Surface contaminants are very common in any working area inside the laboratory. Dirts are easy to detect, but biohazards are not. Therefore, a thorough discussion about disinfection will introduce us to the different methods and disinfectants that can be used to eliminate contaminants not only inside the laboratory but also at home. First, let's define some terms. So in this slide, we can see four important terms that are related to disinfection or decontamination. And we start first by defining high-touch surfaces, which are surfaces that are commonly touched by persons or individuals or those that have frequent contact with an individual's hands. Examples of high-touch surfaces include doorknobs, call bells, bed rails, light switches, wall areas around the toilet, and even edges of privacy curtains. We also have low-touch surfaces, which are surfaces that have minimal contact with an individual's hands, and that include your walls, ceilings, mirrors, and window sills. We also define bactericidal, which is a property of an antimicrobial agent that usually kill the target microorganisms. The opposite of of bactericidal is your bacteriostatic, which are agents that inhibit bacterial growth but generally do not kill the microorganism. Now, what is disinfection or decontamination? This is the process of removing or neutralizing contaminants that have accumulated in the workplace, personnel, and equipment. It is intended to inactivate the microbes by physical, chemical, and biological processes, or a combination of these methods. Inactivation is achieved by altering or destroying the essential structures or functions within the microbe. Inactivation processes include denaturation of the following: proteins, nucleic acids, and lipids. When performing disinfection or decontamination, we always make use of disinfectants. Disinfectants are usually bactericidal or those that have the ability to kill the microorganism, but occasionally they can also be bacteriostatic. Now let's try to differentiate between antiseptics and disinfectants because maybe these two have been used interchangeably before, but in reality, these two terms are not similar and they have different functions. We start first with our antiseptics. These are solutions that are used on skin and mucous membranes to kill microorganisms, and it is not intended for use on inanimate objects. An example of that is our hand sanitizer. And then we also have our disinfectants, which are solutions that are used to kill microorganisms on inanimate objects, but are not intended for use on our skin or mucous membrane. So in the picture, we can see different kinds of disinfectants. You have your Clorox, you have Mr. Clean. So we do not use them when cleaning our hands. Okay, we only use them to clean tabletops, counters, or other inanimate objects. Here are the properties of an ideal disinfectant. First, we have the disinfectant should have a wide spectrum of antimicrobial activity. Ideally, it must be effective against a wide variety of infectious pathogens like your gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, acid-fast bacteria, bacterial endospores, fungi, and viruses at high dilutions. Next property is that it should not be affected by environmental factors. Our disinfectant should be active in the presence of organic matter as seen in blood, sputum, and feces, and it must be compatible with soaps and detergents or other chemicals encountered in use. The third property is that it should be relatively safe to people that are exposed or using the disinfectant. It should not be toxic to humans. In practice, this balance between effectiveness and low toxicity for humans is hard to achieve. Some chemicals are used despite their low effectiveness because they are relatively non-toxic. Fourth property is that it should be stable. And when we say stable, your disinfectant must be stable upon storage or should not undergo any chemical change. It should also be stable whether it is concentrated or diluted. Next property is that it should be odorless or it should have a pleasant odor to facilitate its routine use. And our disinfectant must have surface compatibility. It should not corrode instruments and metallic surfaces and should not cause the deterioration of cloth, rubber, plastics, and other materials. Other properties of an ideal disinfectant are the following. The disinfectant should have contact time and proper temperature. Sufficient time and appropriate temperature must be allowed for action of the disinfectant and may depend on the degree of contamination and organic matter load. Next, the disinfectant must have a residual activity and effects on fabric and metal. Our disinfectant should leave an antimicrobial film on the treated surface. Third is that our disinfectant must be relatively inexpensive or it must be economical. It should not be prohibitively high in cost. And lastly, our disinfectant must be environment friendly. It should not damage the environment on disposal. For the methods of disinfection, we are going to discuss two general methods. First is the physical method and second is the chemical method of disinfection. So we start first with our physical methods. For the physical methods of disinfection, we have boiling at 100 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. So this process generally kills vegetative bacteria. Next, we have pasteurization or pasteurizing at 63 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes or 72 degrees Celsius for 15 seconds. So this process kills food pathogens without damaging the nutritional value or flavor of the food. If you take a look at the temperature and the time it takes to perform this procedure, we have two different temperature and time. For 63 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, the temperature is quite low and it takes a longer time to perform the procedure as compared to the 72 degrees Celsius for 15 seconds, which is high temperature but the time is shorter. So basically, there is an inverse relationship between temperature and time when performing pasteurization. The third physical method is the use of non-ionizing radiation such as the UV light, and we have already discussed this one in our lesson on the biosafety cabinet, but take note that our UV light it does not penetrate well and organisms must have direct surface exposure such as the working surface of our biosafety cabinet for this form of disinfection to work. So these are some examples of illustrations depicting the three physical methods of disinfection. So we have boiling, which is applicable to water. If you are unsure whether the water you're drinking is safe, you can boil the water for 15 minutes before you drink it. And then we also have pasteurization, very applicable for milk products or milk because when we try to get the milk from cows, for example, it's not a guarantee that you can directly drink the milk. You still have to let the milk undergo pasteurization to remove any pathogens. And we have our non-ionizing radiation. And as you can see in the picture, that is very common among laboratory sections such as the microbiology section. Now we go to the next general method of disinfection, which is the chemical method. So in this method of disinfection, we are going to talk about the different disinfectants that are used for chemical disinfection. So we start first with alcohol. Alcohols refer to two water-soluble chemicals that are commonly used, the ethyl alcohol and the isopropyl alcohol. Alcohols are rapidly bactericidal rather than bacteriostatic against vegetative forms of bacteria, which means to say that if you're going to add alcohol or pour alcohol on your hands, any microorganisms present on your hands, especially those vegetative forms of microorganisms, they are easily or automatically killed by the presence of your alcohol. The bactericidal activity, however, drops sharply when we dilute our alcohols below 50% concentration. If the range of the alcohol is supposed to be 60 to 90% in water, volume per volume, but if you're going to dilute the alcohol below 50%, the bactericidal activity of this solution will be affected. Our alcohols are not effective against bacterial spores and they have limited effectiveness against non-enveloped virus. Their antimicrobial activity can be attributed to their ability to denature proteins. So basically, even if our alcohols are considered bactericidal, their activity against other microorganisms are limited, especially those microorganisms that produce spores. Alcohol cannot easily kill these microorganisms. Higher concentrations of this solution are less effective as the action of the denaturing proteins is inhibited without the presence of water. In addition, 70% ethyl alcohol is more effective as a disinfectant than 95% ethyl alcohol because the increased water hydrolyzing bonds in protein molecules make the killing of microorganisms more effective. Another solution used for chemical disinfection is the aldehyde. For the aldehyde, the most commonly used aldehyde or the main aldehyde used is formaldehyde. Formaldehyde in solution is useful for decontaminating certain instruments. However, the only disadvantage of using this solution or chemical is that it produces irritating fumes that irritates the eyes and nose. That's why it's not generally used as a surface disinfectant. Another solution or chemical is the halogen. An example of that is your chlorine or Clorox. Halogens, especially chlorine and iodine, are frequently used as disinfectants. But between the two, chlorine is the most often used in the form of your sodium hypochlorite or otherwise known as the household bleach. CDC recommends that any blood spills on tabletops, you should disinfect the tabletop with household bleach in a 1:10 dilution. Another chemical method of disinfection involves the use of heavy metals. The most widely used heavy metals are those of mercury, silver, and copper. These heavy metals and their compounds act as antimicrobial by combining with the cellular protein of the target pathogen. High concentrations of heavy metals coagulate cytoplasmic proteins, resulting in the damage or death of the cell. Because mercury is toxic to the environment, heavy metals containing mercury are no longer recommended as a chemical method for disinfection. Aside from heavy metals, we also have the quaternary ammonium compounds or otherwise known as quats. These are used to disinfect bench tops, or other surfaces in the laboratory. The disadvantage of using quats is that when a surface is contaminated with organic material such as blood or feces, these may inactivate the quaternary ammonium compounds, and thus the full potential of their function is not realized. We also have another chemical method for disinfection, which makes use of phenolics. Phenol disinfectants are effective against a broad range of bacteria, specifically the gram-positive bacteria and also envelope viruses. These disinfectants maintain their activity in the presence of organic material. However, they are not effective against non-envelope viruses and spores. Examples of phenolics include the benzyl 4-chlorophenol, amylphenol, and the phenylphenol. For cleaning of glasswares in the laboratory, the 3% phenolic detergent is most commonly used. Advantages of using this solution include good general purpose disinfectant. It's not readily inactivated by organic matter, and it's active against a wide range of microorganisms. The disadvantages, however, are it's not sporicidal, or meaning to say it is not effective against bacterial spores. It can only be effective against bacterial spores if the instruments or materials that are contaminated with these microorganisms are totally immersed in the said solution or chemical disinfectant. We also have hypochlorite, which is the most widely used of the chlorine disinfectants and are available in liquid or solid forms. The most common chlorine products are in aqueous solutions of 4 to 6% sodium hypochlorite, readily available as household bleach. Dilutions of bleach should be made up fresh weekly to prevent the loss of germicidal action during prolonged storage. A 10% solution of sodium hypochlorite is an effective agent against bacterial and viral contamination. Advantages of using hypochlorite include it has a broad spectrum of activity, antimicrobial activity against a lot of bacteria and even viruses. It's unaffected by water hardness. It's economical or inexpensive, fast-acting, and low incidence of serious toxicity. The disadvantages, however, include corrosive effect to metals at high concentrations, especially if the concentration is greater than 500 parts per million or ppm, inactivation in the presence of your organic matter like blood, discoloration or bleaching of fabrics, and the release of toxic chlorine gas when hypochlorite is mixed with ammonia or acid. Iodine can also be used as a chemical method for disinfection, and it is prepared either as a tincture with alcohol or as an iodophore coupled to a neutral polymer, such as your povidone iodine, or popularly known as the betadine solution. A 70% ethyl alcohol followed by an iodophore. This is the most common compound used for skin disinfection before drawing blood specimens, either for culture or surgery. Basically, these methods or procedures require complete antisepsis. So in order to achieve that, you have to perform 3 changes of alcohol and iodine. Iodine is used as an antiseptic and disinfectant for blood culture bottles and also for medical equipment such as your thermometers and endoscopes. The disinfective ability of iodine is neutralized in the presence of organic material. Hence, frequent applications are needed for thorough disinfection. Iodine tinctures can also be very irritating to tissues. They can stain fabrics and can be corrosive, which are the disadvantages of using this solution. Another solution that can be used as part of the chemical methods of disinfection is the hydrogen peroxide. It's a well-known antiseptic to clean wounds or clean surgical sites after closure, but can prolong healing time if it's used in high concentrations. Stabilized hydrogen peroxides can be used as disinfectants for environmental surfaces. We also make use of detergents and soaps as chemical methods of disinfection. They are widely used as surface active agents, wetting agents, and emulsifiers. The most the most important antibacterial agents known are the cetrimide and benzalkonium chloride. Soaps that are made from saturated fatty acids are more effective against gram-negative bacteria or bacilli, while those soaps that are made from unsaturated fatty acids have greater action against gram-positive microorganisms. The modes of action of our disinfectants were already mentioned somehow in the first part of our presentation, but let me tell you that these modes of action are important in destroying the microorganisms that are found on the surfaces of our working area inside the laboratory or even the surfaces found at home. So some of the modes of action of our disinfectants are the following: alteration of membrane permeability, damage to protein, rupture of cell membrane which leads to the expulsion or release of the different organelles of the microorganism, damage to nucleic acids, and interference with the microorganism's metabolic pathway. Now we go to the different factors affecting the effectivity of the different solutions that we use as disinfectants. So we start off with the types and number of microorganisms present. Time is an essential factor for this because the time necessary for killing microorganism increases in direct proportion to the number of microorganisms present, or what we call the microbial load. So as the number of microorganisms gets higher, there should also be a longer time to eliminate these pathogens. Bacterial spores such as the Bacillus species, they are the most resistant microorganisms, followed by the Mycobacteria, the causative agent for tuberculosis. Then we have the non-enveloped viruses, fungi, the vegetative bacteria like your gram-negative rods, and your enveloped viruses. We also have temperature. The lethal effect on bacterial population can be increased by increasing the temperature. So there is a direct relationship between temperature and the microbial load. The third factor is pH. A change of pH during the disinfection process can affect the rate of growth inoculum. A pH of 6 to 8 is optimal for the growth of many bacteria, and the rate of growth declines on either side of the range. So if it's less than 6, it will affect the growth of the microorganism, and if it's more than 8, it will also affect the growth of a certain pathogen. Phenolic and acidic antimicrobial agents usually have greatest antimicrobial activity in acidic conditions. Another factor affecting disinfection is the concentration of the disinfectant used. The lethal effect on the bacterial population is increased by also increasing the concentration of the disinfectant. Next, we have the amount of organic materials present, like blood, mucus, and pus. Organic materials should be mechanically removed before chemical sterilization to decrease the microbial load. Also, there are some disinfectants that become inactivated in the presence of organic materials. Next, we have the nature of surface to be disinfected. Does it have potential for corrosion, or is the surface porous or non-porous. And lastly, the type of water available. Hard water may reduce the rate of killing microorganisms. Hard water, by definition, is water which contains a high concentration of calcium and magnesium ions. It is these minerals which prevent soap and detergents from being as effective as they should be. When the soap molecules come in contact with the magnesium and calcium in hard water, a chemical reaction occurs and magnesium stearate or calcium stearate forms. This is the waxy substance we all know as soap scum. This reaction prevents the soap from producing the cleaning lather as it was intended. It is a completely different story for soft water. Naturally occurring soft water does not have these minerals present, and therefore, detergents and soaps do not react as they do in hard water. Water that has been softened by a water softener typically replaces magnesium and calcium minerals to sodium or potassium. These minerals do not react with compounds found in the soap or detergent, so they perform as they were intended. For this portion of our discussion on the principles of environmental cleaning and disinfection, I got the content from an article published by the World Health Organization last May this year, an article entitled Cleaning and Disinfection of Environmental Surfaces in the Context of COVID-19, and I believe that it's appropriate for our discussion on the contamination or disinfection. So cleaning helps to remove pathogens or significantly reduce their number on contaminated surfaces. Cleaning is an essential first step in any disinfection process. So you don't immediately perform disinfection on a contaminated surface. You still have to perform cleaning or removal of any debris before applying the disinfectant. Cleaning with water, soap, and some form of mechanical action in the form of brushing and scrubbing remove and reduce dirt, debris, and other organic materials such as blood, secretions, and excretions, but the act of cleaning does not actually kill the microorganism. It is the application of the disinfectant that kills the microorganism. Organic matter can impede direct contact of your disinfectant to a surface and inactivate the germicidal properties or mode of action of several disinfectants. In the previous slides, we have mentioned that some disinfectants are actually inactivated in the presence of organic material. So before we apply these disinfectants, we have to remove first the organic materials. The concentration and contact time of a disinfectant are also critical for effective surface disinfection. Disinfectant solutions must be prepared and used according to the manufacturer's recommendation for volume and contact time. Concentrations with inadequate dilution during preparation, like too high or too low, may reduce their effectiveness. High concentrations increase chemical exposure to users and may also damage surfaces. Enough disinfectant solution should be applied to allow surfaces to remain wet and untouched long enough for the disinfectant to inactivate the pathogens as recommended by the manufacturer. A chemical disinfectant such as chlorine or alcohol should be applied after cleaning to kill any remaining microorganisms. The proper way of cleaning should progress from the least soiled or the cleanest to the most soiled or dirtiest areas, and from the higher to lower levels so that debris may fall on the floor and is cleaned last in a systematic manner to avoid missing any areas. In terms of using of chlorine-based products in the disinfection or decontamination of a contaminated working area or any area in the hospital where COVID-positive patients were confined, Here are the things that the World Health Organization would like to recommend. First is hypochlorite-based products including liquid, solid, or powdered formulations can be used for disinfection. And hypochlorite displays a broad spectrum of antimicrobial activity, and it is effective against several kinds of pathogens at various concentrations. Now, what are these concentrations that can be used for disinfection? We can make use of the 0.1% concentration, which is equivalent to 1,000 parts per million. At this concentration, most pathogens are inactivated in the healthcare setting. Or you can also make use of the 0.5% concentration, which is equivalent to 5,000 parts per million. And at this concentration, this is very effective in disinfecting blood and body fluids large spills. So it is only appropriate that since some of our disinfectants are inactivated in the presence of organic material, we have to increase the concentration to make the disinfectant more effective. These formulations dissolve in water to create a dilute aqueous chlorine solution in which undissociated hypochlorous acid is active as the antimicrobial compound. Therefore, regardless of the concentration used, it is important to first clean surfaces thoroughly with soap and water or detergent using mechanical action such as scrubbing or friction. Hypochlorite is rapidly inactivated in the presence of organic materials, but based on the previous bullet, in order for the hypochlorite to maintain its function or to improve its function, you have to increase the concentration of the hypochlorite solution. Side effects of using chlorine-based products include corrosion of metal, and it can also contribute to skin irritation or mucous membrane irritation, and the smell of chlorine, especially for people with asthma, um, it promotes asthma attack. So much better if you're going to use hypochlorite during this infection, you must be wearing personal protective equipment, and that includes your mask. Chlorine solutions should be stored in opaque containers inside a well-ventilated area that is protected from direct sunlight, because if you're going to expose your chlorine solutions to the sun or direct sunlight, it will actually decrease the effectivity of the disinfectant. Chlorine solutions are most stable at high pH of pH greater than 9, but the disinfectant properties of chlorine are stronger at lower pH, that is less than 8, or neutral leaning towards acidic. Solutions of 0.5% and 0.05% chlorine have been shown to be stable for more than 30 days at temperatures of 25 to 35 degrees Celsius when the pH is above 9. However, chlorine solutions at lower pH have much more shorter shelf lives. Ideally, chlorine solutions should be freshly prepared every day. If this is not possible and the chlorine solution must be used for several days, they should be tested daily to ensure that the chlorine concentration is maintained. Several tests can be used to gauge the chlorine strength, and these include chemical titration, chemical spectrometry or colorimetry, the use of color wheels and test strips in order of decreasing accuracy. Commercial sodium hypochlorite products with different levels of concentration may be readily available for use in a variety of settings. Concentration may also vary according to the national regulations and the manufacturer's formulations. To achieve the desired concentration, it is necessary to prepare sodium hypochlorite by diluting the basic aqueous solution with a given proportion of clean, non-turbid water to produce the final desired concentration. You can actually prepare the household bleach at home by looking at this calculation of your sodium hypochlorite concentration. So you can make use of this as your guide on how to make your household bleach. So you have the percent of chlorine or the concentration of chlorine in the liquid sodium hypochlorite divided by the desired concentration of chlorine that you want to prepare minus 1. The answer for this one will give you the total parts of water needed to dissolve each part of your sodium hypochlorite. So take for example, if you want to prepare a 0.5% concentration of sodium hypochlorite, you just have to divide the given concentration of your liquid sodium hypochlorite that you bought from the supermarket. Usually it's at 5% concentration. You divide that one by 0.5%. The answer for that is 10 minus 1. So you have to have 9 parts of water for each part of your sodium hypochlorite. That will give you a ratio of 1:9, wherein 1 is the concentration or the amount of sodium hypochlorite that you're going to use. You have to dilute that one to 9 parts of water. So that's how you prepare your household bleach. Okay. Now, what if only the solid form of your sodium hypochlorite is available at home? It's not a problem because you can still prepare your household bleach using the solid form of your sodium hypochlorite. The solid formulations of hypochlorite, like in the form of powder or granules, may also be available in a variety of settings. Solid formulations are available as concentrated high-test hypochlorite with concentrations ranging from 65 to 70% and as chlorine or calcium hypochlorite powder with a concentration of 35%. To produce the final desired concentration, the weight, which is in grams, of your calcium hypochlorite that should be added per liter of water can be determined based on the calculation shown in the slide. So if you have the solid form of your sodium hypochlorite at home, you can still prepare your household bleach using that one by following this formula. So you have the concentration of chlorine desired divided by the given concentration of chlorine in hypochlorite powder or granules. The answer for that one, you have to multiply it by 1000 to obtain the weight of the calcium hypochlorite powder that is needed to be dissolved in 1 liter of your water. So take for example, if you want to prepare a 0.5% concentration of your sodium hypochlorite, you just have to divide that one by 35%, which is already a given concentration of your hypochlorite powder. And then the answer for that one, you just have to multiply it by 1000. It will give you a final answer of 14.3 grams, meaning to say that this is the amount of calcium hypochlorite powder that you're going to dissolve in 1 liter of your diluent, which is the water, and it already has the 0.5% concentration of chlorine that you desired. Now, in terms of spraying disinfectants and other no-touch methods, the World Health Organization recommends the following. The routine application of disinfectants to environmental surfaces by spraying or fogging, or also known as fumigation or misting, is not recommended by the World Health Organization for COVID-19. It is ineffective in removing contaminants outside of direct spray zones, and aside from that, it can actually result in risks to the eyes, respiratory or skin irritation, bronchospasm due to inhalation, and gastrointestinal effects such as nausea and vomiting. It would not actually reduce an infected person's ability to spread the virus through droplets or contact because the disinfectant produced during fumigation or misting cannot get inside the body and eliminate the causative agent of COVID-19. Spraying may not be effective in removing organic material and may miss surfaces shielded by objects, folded fabrics, or surfaces with intricate designs. The disinfection using a disinfectant in the form of a spray and wiping the surface with a disinfectant still remains the best practice for removing or decontaminating a contaminated surface. Here are some sample photos of spray disinfectants using misting or fogging. And maybe you have seen this one during the early cases of COVID in our country, wherein some supermarkets were able to install this spray tents in the entrance of the wet market for people to go through before they can get inside the market. So the World Health Organization does not recommend this kind of disinfection, especially that the person is exposed to the disinfectant and it has health effects on the person, as mentioned in the previous slide. For the disinfection of the different areas in the healthcare setting, so these are the things that the World Health Organization recommends. For healthcare settings environment, particular attention must be paid to environmental cleaning of high-touch surfaces and items like light switches, bed rails, door handles, intravenous pumps, tables, water or beverage pitchers, trays, and sinks. Remember, high-touch surfaces, these are areas where individuals usually have frequent contacts using their hands. And for non-healthcare settings environment, for the non-healthcare settings environment, this is talking about our homes, or schools, or offices. So for this type of environment, high-touch surfaces in these settings should be identified for priority disinfection. These include door and window handles, kitchen and food preparation areas, countertops, bathroom surfaces, toilets and taps, touchscreen personal devices, personal computer keyboards, and work surfaces. So, since microorganisms are not seen by the naked eye, we should always expect that whatever our hands touch, these materials or these inanimate objects, they always contain pathogens. And that ends our discussion on disinfection and decontamination. I hope you have learned something out from our discussion. And thank you so much for listening. Have a good day.